English translation, 220th contact, Wednesday, 2nd December 1987, 21:37 hours.
Hello, my friend. It is cold today, so I am glad I can be here in your workroom.
Welcome, Ketzel. Glad to see you. Do you have something special that you have brought here today?
I felt the urge to hold a private conversation with you.
Somehow I can also say that of myself. Is it possible, however, before we talk in private, to discuss a few other things first, and perhaps raise a few questions?
Of course. What then is your desire?
Some time ago, you promised to tell me something more about the upcoming research relating to gene technology. What will be of particular significance in relation to this in the coming time, and about when will this be?
That is of correctness. I have in fact given you a promise for such future things. But today I only want to mention one of the important things relating to this, which will happen shortly after the turn of the millennium. And if everything results in accordance with the correctness, without any change in the upcoming events, then the event will arise in the month of September or October of the year 2002. It concerns an experiment in genetically engineered medicine. In the new millennium, earthly medicine will achieve greater progress, namely with genetically altered bacteria that are released in human bodies. The first experiment in this regard will be held in Holland, and as just explained, in the month of September or October 2002. This arises from foresight, but which unfortunately has not yielded complete clarity because certain factors caused a slight veiling. Medicine will make great progress through this initial earthly experiment in genetic medicine. So in the future, genetically altered microorganisms will play a new and very important role in the therapeutic treatment of diseases in human beings and also in their domestic animals. The same will also be the case in later times with viruses, which will likewise become important therapeutic factors in the fight against diseases through gene manipulation. The whole of this medical gene technology will also find further application against cancer. However, this will still take a long time and thus will not already be the case after the turn of the millennium, for until then, several years will still pass in the third millennium. Nevertheless, the development in genetic medicine in this regard is not to be stopped, despite the unreasonable enemies of gene technology. However, it should still be noted by the researchers and genetic engineers that extreme caution is required in their experiments, for the slightest carelessness and wrong manipulation, etc. in gene therapy medicine and other genetic manipulations, which are now emerging in the coming time and which can no longer be stopped, can cause immense disaster. In fact, there is always a certain risk. So even also in the aforementioned form, because genetically manipulated germs can be transferred into humans by various circumstances and opportunities in natural bacteria species or bacterial strains. If this happens, then the genetically manipulated microbes, under certain conditions, can be transferred from people who are therapeutically treated with them to healthy people and be epidemically spread. Therefore, the greatest caution is required during the handling of genetically altered microorganisms, not just in terms of medicine, but also in terms of the growth and the variation in species, as well as the immunization, etc., which has reference to bacteria and viruses, etc., and also to humans, animals, and plants. Nevertheless, if this condition is observed, then gene technology or gene manipulation can become the true blessing of the earth human and also be to his or her advantage and welfare.
It would still interest me now as to what you have to say about the more and more rampant thunderstorms, storms, torrential rainfalls and the resulting floods, as well as the volcanic eruptions and other natural disasters. if you can state anything else at all that is worth mentioning in this respect.
Everything relating to this has actually been said already. An expansion can only be that in the future, particularly in the new millennium, droughts, forest fires, thunderstorms of every kind, storms, rainfalls, floods, and destructions of vast areas, as well as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and mountain shifts, etc., become worse and worse and more comprehensive and cause damage and destruction that will no longer be able to be repaired for years and decades by human beings, and which will demand billions of amounts of financial resources. Everything will assume such magnitudes as these have never been the case in all of human memory. It will also lead to looting, for diseases will emerge and epidemics will spread, to which human beings will fall victim, which will be caused, not in the least, by the corpses of rotting animals that die by the storms, as well as by the unsanitary conditions and immense vermin populations that result from the whole thing. Everything will stand in connection with the climate change, which will partly be of natural origin, but also about 50% of the Earth humans' fault, and this percentage is constantly increasing. A destruction and change of the global climate is caused by the steadily growing overpopulation and their needs and waste material, which results, however, through the technologically caused environmental pollution, through huge dirt emissions in the form of smoke, steam, chemicals, gases, and exhaust fumes, etc., from which also a part of the environmental degradation takes place, like, among other things, also through the obstructing and building over of the vitally necessary fertile land and the destruction of the oxygen lungs of the earth, like even the rainforests and the many other green areas and the sea plankton. A process that can hardly or no longer be stopped after the reaching of the third millennium. As of now, the climate has already changed in such a way that it looks very bad. Thus, a fall of the climate is already pre-programmed at the current time and is not to be stopped anymore. And the faster the overpopulation grows, the faster all the evil brought forth by human beings grows, and the faster the already unavoidable climate change arises. All storms and all other things, as they were mentioned, would not be so catastrophic in their purely natural origin and occurrences if these would remain purely according to nature. But through the unreasonable involvement of the human beings' evil, which they release through their overpopulation, everything becomes much worse and more vicious than it could be caused by nature alone. Already for quite some time, nature has begun to set itself to the defense against the humanly caused evil directed against it. And that's exactly what it will still increasingly do in the coming time, and through this, it will produce immense disasters. And if irresponsible scientists now still claim that all purely natural events are to be attributed to this and not to the guilt of the Earth humans, and thus the responsibility wants to be shifted from them, nevertheless, voices from the ranks of the scientists are still to be heard in the 90s, and especially in the new millennium, that everything is not due to purely natural processes, but that to a large extent, which still amounts to 50% today, the Earth human bears the guilt for everything.
Thanks. That probably still had to be said. Then another question. The electromagnetic spectrum. This comprises 7 main forms and naturally also exhibits different high frequencies and wavelengths. The electromagnetic radiations, which are known to our earthly scientists, are called gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet rays, light rays, infrared rays, microwaves, short waves, ultra-short waves, and radio waves. And to my knowledge, gamma rays exhibit the smallest wavelengths, and radio waves exhibit the largest. But now you already told me some time ago that there are still other rays, and indeed, in addition to the radioactive radiation, also neutrino radiation, electron radiation, and also tachyon radiation. Most forms of radiation are, however, invisible. Is this right?
That is of correctness. But why do you ask?
It is only a reassurance, because I have explained everything further in connection with the cosmic electromagnetic life energy, respectively, evolutionary energy, which are also based on radiations and swinging waves in certain frequency ranges, as you are well aware.
No, that is not well known to me. From where do you possess this knowledge? It seems strange to me that you possess this knowledge that is still unknown to us. Somehow, I bump into secrets with you over and over again.
I really should not say that, at least not at the present time. But if you can give me your word that you will be silent over this for the time being, then I will inform you of the origin of my knowledge. You would still have to remain silent for at least 2 to 3 years.
Be sure of my word.
Well then, the knowledge comes from the spirit teaching, aka creation energy teaching, and it is contained in the memory banks of Henoch, Enoch, and Nocodemion.
And you are able to withdraw knowledge from these memory banks and learn from this?
I can, yes.
You give me a new riddle, which I will have to solve. Will you tell me how you do this? That is not possible for us.
No, I am not allowed to do that yet.
Is it possible, however, that you can instruct me in the teaching of the evolutive energy and the cosmic electromagnetic life energy so that I can retransmit it too?
I can do that, but only at a later time, just when the time comes to do so. But now, what is with my question?
Be assured already of my and all our thanks.
Thanks are neither appropriate now nor later. It is part of my duty, as you will find out soon enough. If you permit, I would like to ask another question regarding the financial crisis and economic crisis, and the breakdowns of the corporations, etc. through mismanagement, huge settlements, and salaries in the hundreds of thousands and millions of financial sums for managers and boards of directors, etc. Is it not also true that the working class will go along with the greater demands for compensations and will also contribute to the whole disaster, whereby the workers' organizations or labor unions will probably also contribute a lot to it?
That is of correctness, for that will actually be the case. Nevertheless, this evil also applies to the high state officials and leaders who have received outrageously huge and extensively rendered remunerations and pensions since time immemorial, as I know from our investigations of a related form. And this rendering of the remunerations of the leaders and administrators, etc., will be shamelessly boosted further in the coming time, while various layers of workers will only have pitiful incomes and livelihoods, and will sometimes even live in bitter poverty.
And what about health service? In terms of health insurances, will the premiums there be brought in line with the demands for high wages, making them more expensive? When I returned to Switzerland in 1969 and locked in health insurance for my wife, myself, Gilgamesha, and Atlantis with the Barretts-Weiler Health Insurance Company, I paid around 35 Swiss francs a month for the 4 of us. In 1973, I had to change the health insurance company because I moved with my family to Hinwil. And therefore, I joined Helvetia Health Insurance, and, as you can see here from the health insurance book, in the month of June, I already paid 42.10 Swiss francs for the whole family. Then, in July, it was already 54.50 Swiss francs. Then Methuselah was born, after which the premium increased to 60.50 Swiss francs. From then, the premium rose further to 74.90 Swiss francs for 1974, and then to 86.30 Swiss francs as of January 1975, after which the whole thing continued to increase year after year, Consequently, I already have to shell out 213.50 Swiss francs for this month of December, 1987. And the premiums are to increase enormously again next year, as has already been announced. If this continues in such a wise, then I will soon no longer know how I should still shell out the health insurance for the whole family. To all of that is still coming 10% as well as a larger franchise amount per year, in addition to each doctor's bill. And as you know, my wife constantly has horrendous doctor's bills and hospital bills, as well as hospital bills for operations, etc.
We have also looked into these concerns. And unfortunately, I have to tell you that the premiums will continue to increase rapidly, according to which you will soon have to pay about 300 Swiss francs per month for you alone.
Nice outlooks. So let's talk about something else. I still have a question regarding neutron stars, which exhibit the greatest density in matter, as our scientists say. A thimbleful of such a neutron star should weigh, as they say, about 1,000,000,000,000 tons. I would like to ask whether they have not made a mistake in the weight, for I find 1,000,000,000,000 tons somewhat steep.
Nevertheless, it is of correctness. However, it is to be rectified that neutron stars do not exhibit the densest and heaviest mass, but rather other objects in the material universe. The matter of these tremendously heavier objects is also of a different kind than what is known to the earthly physical scientists and astrophysical scientists, as well as astrophysical chemists.
Aha, and what do you call these objects? And at the same time, does it concern stars?
The second part of your question is to be affirmed in the way that, as a rule, it concerns former stars, so collapsed solar structures. But still, such objects also exist in the form of still active suns. We call the collapsed structures metendarthalos, which translated into your language means dark heavy suns. We call the still active suns of this kind satendarthalos, so radiant heavy suns, or active heavy suns. These names correspond to traditions from very early times of our people.
Then another question that has reference to the moon. When I was allowed to make a lunar orbit once with Sim Yase and her beamship, she explained a few things to me about our Earth's satellite. So among other things, that the side which is always facing the Earth, or the crust of the moon, as this is called, is only about 35,000 meters thick. The back of the satellite, however, is about 70,000 meters thick. Moreover, the Earth with its moon is an absolutely special case in the Sol system because out of all the inner planets, only it is orbited by such a large satellite, which stabilizes the rotational axis of the planet, and which provides for the high and low tides and for the climate, which is relatively stable. About the origin of the moon, which drifted many millions of years ago out of your space-time configuration into ours, and was captured by the Earth. The earthly scientists have the craziest ideas, one of which is that a large celestial body from the masses of Mars had already collided with the developing Earth in primeval times, through which a huge piece of the developing Earth from its early days was torn out or ejected from this, in order to circle around the Earth in the end and firmly settle to form the moon. At the same time, it is not considered with this crazy assertion that if such a chunk would have actually been ejected from the Earth, just by the collision with a Mars-sized space projectile, then this chunk would have been shot so far out into space by the unimaginable force that it would have sought its own way as a wandering planet through the Sol system and would not have settled around the Earth. But now, I would like to ask you, why does the density ratio of the moon on the front and the back vary so much? This has to have its particular reason, I think. If you can still explain a few things about this to me, then I would be very grateful to you.
The whole thing is founded in the mass and the attractive force of the Earth. Through the Earth's attractive force, the moon, during the course of its existence as an Earth satellite, has shifted the focal point of its mass away from the Earth, whereby its geometric center has shifted. This concerns an anomaly that can appear in any planetary satellite. But of course, the mass and matter also play an important role, as well as the attractive forces of the respective planets and naturally the escape velocities of the satellites. This fact ultimately determines how the density of the crust of the satellite forms on the side facing away from the planet. If it concerns a moon that is constantly rotating on its own axis, so not a so-called synchronous one, like with the Earth's satellite, then an aggregate satellite and average symmetry results. But if it concerns a synchronous satellite, which therefore always has the same side facing the planet, then the side facing away from the planet condenses, whereby then just the escape velocity of the moon plays a significant role. The force of the escape velocity pushes the mass and, thus, the matter outwardly and, therefore, to the side of the planet facing away from the satellite. But while it is held by the overall attractive force of the planet in its outer area and in a specific orbit. With the Earth's moon, it was such that at the time when it was pulled by the Earth into its course, it melted down into deep layers and began to draw its course around the planet as a glowing ball. The liquid material of the moon was influenced by the Earth's attractive force and shifted in such a manner that through the escape velocity on the side facing away from the Earth, a strong thickening arose. The rotation around the Earth stabilized over time, and also the entire sea of magma cooled off and solidified. What still arose further on the moon after that was a so-called acidic volcanism. It should still be mentioned that the moon was a very valuable and highly stressed protective shield for the Earth since its existence, still is and will still continue to be, namely with respect to small comets as well as meteorites that crashed down upon this thousands of times over. The course of the existence of the moon and beat countless craters into the surface of the satellite. Through these space projectiles, the most diverse materials were also placed on the moon or hurled up from the interior onto the surface. As this happened, for example, via an enormous meteorite, whose impact was observed from the Earth by the people, and which unleashed an unusually high level of potassium, phosphorus, and thorium, as well as various rare Earth elements.
Man, Kitzel, that is more of an explanation than I had expected. But now I would like to ask you something else about the legendary Celtic kingdom of Noricum, which should have been situated at Lake Chiem. Today, everything belongs to Germany. You told me that there, cultic blood sacrifices had been quite common among the Celts, and to be sure, in connection with the sea, god Bedeus. Can you tell me more about this?
Dear friend, that should be enough of the questions and answers for today. Let us now turn to the private things, for whose sake I have come here.
Of course. But just this one question to answer.
Well, but really only this concern. It has now been more than 2,000 years since a water sanctuary, that is to say a cult site, was built for the sea god Bedeus in the Celtic kingdom Noricum. In the Celtic faith, there existed the idea with regard to this imaginary god that he would evoke storms and tempests through his wrath, whereby the wrath of the god could only be appeased through the sacrificing of human blood. Virgins were chosen for this, who were sacrificed on a special Bedeus altar, and indeed as the carotid artery of their living bodies were split, and then the hearts were cut out of their bodies. The blood was collected in a blood sacrifice bowl, which consisted of pure 18-karat gold sheet metal, rolled by a blacksmith. A vessel that weighed a little more than 10 kilograms, and that was decorated all around by Celtic cult motifs, etc., and that had a diameter of about 50 centimeters, Then, the further cult action consisted of the fact that first, the blood was sacrificed to the sea god Bedeus by being poured ritually, during the uttering of incantations, into the waters of the lake, while the cut-out hearts of the virgins were hacked into the smallest pieces and then likewise thrown into the lake under other incantations.
And does this golden blood sacrificial bowl of the cult still exist, or was it melted by the Celts again?
When the water god's cult site, that is to say the water sanctuary, was destroyed, the sacrificial bowl sank into the lake.
Then it must still be lying there today on the lake's bottom. Where could this be found, then, at the present time? This certainly has a horrendous value.
It certainly is very valuable at the present time. Are you interested in it? If that is the case, then I can be helpful to you in the recovery of the bowl, for I know its resting place, which is only about 80 meters from the shore, and to be sure, at a place that is now named Arlaching. If you then sell it, then you will bring in a very high sum for yourself.
No, I am not interested in that. First of all, I would not want to enrich myself illegally through this, for here on the earth, antiquity is legally protected and cannot simply be sold. Consequently, I would make myself liable to prosecution. And secondly, I am not interested in it because I am of the view that I must fulfill my task through my own strength, and by honest means, and thus, in a modest manner. In a private manner, I am already not interested at all because I am absolutely content with what I have, and thus I have no desire for fortune or for other great possessions. With that, probably all is said, except that I still wanted to ask as to whether the sacrificial bowl will one day be found by the Earth humans.
That escapes my knowledge.
Then now we can move on to the private matters.